My name is John Passfield, and the title of this reading will be John and Dickens, Video 26, Story Towers. Excuse me. Here's my novella, John and Dickens, A Christmas Mystery. Dickens, surrounded by his characters, John in his writing room. Bit of a surprise for John. Writer John Passfield leaves his home, buys a coffee, and drives down to the shores of Lake Erie to perform a Christmas ritual. Strolling along the beach at Port Maitland is something he's done for many years, but this year is different. This year, John suddenly finds himself in the writing room of famed Victorian novelist Charles Dickens, who sets out his new idea for a Christmas tale. Dickens invites John to watch rehearsals for the writing of the story, but as Dickens struggles through contentious negotiations with his amazingly independent characters, John wonders whether A Christmas Carol will ever be written. So, story towers. A tower can be defined as a construction which offers us an elevated viewpoint from which to see other things, to see them in a way which is not possible when standing close to them. So story towers in my novels and novellas are images that, if thought about, offer the main character an alternative viewpoint from which to consider the elements of the experience through which he or she is living, and offer the reader a viewpoint from which to consider the elements of the story of that book. So when a person, John, me, finds himself in the writing room of Charles Dickens and is taken on an adventure by Dickens, how do you evaluate that? Well, these story towers, are images of other experiences that can be measured against the present experience, the meeting of Dickens, the seeing of some of these things that Dickens wants John to see. Okay, so there are 8 story towers in the novella, and I will read all of them. So let's look at the first then. Chapter 2 is where they start, and we're looking for page 16, and here it is. Okay, so there's 3 segments in each chapter of thought. A chapter is a chapter of thought in the mind of the main character. Interspersed within the imagery that is being seen by John, experienced by John, meeting Dickens and so on, are these story towers, these images that help to give a different viewpoint, offer to help to give a different viewpoint. The witch paced back and forth. She had worn a deep groove in the floor of her cave. Every hour she turned the hourglass upside down. Okay, we go on a few pages for the second image unit. I have to figure out what happened. If I don't, I can't go on. It was a week since she had attempted to cast a spell. Okay, and then thirdly, let me find it here. She had looked deep into a pair of human eyes. All the black blood rushed to her head and deserted her heart. It was a human who had cast the greater spell. So if 2 people are interacting, in one sense, we're casting a spell on another person if we want to influence them, right? So who is going to cast the greater spell? Who's going to have the most influence in that relationship? I guess you could say, okay, chapter 3, we go to page 26 to start. The map was spread out on the table. On the desk, a spinning globe. All around, there was nothing but chaos. Endless void on endless void. Okay, a few pages later, we got this. I can make this in 1 week. In fact, I can do it in 6 days. On the 7th, I'll take my rest. Everything will be in motion by that time. And then the last item, 3 in every case, I shall make myself a universe. I'll make it as vast as ever I can. But even bigger, unimaginably bigger, is the mystery that I shall make of the human mind, right? So, not the last unexplored universe, the human mind. The universe itself is largely unexplored. But certainly one of the greatest unexplored universes is the human mind, right? That's what literature tries tries to do, help explore the human mind. Okay, let's go to chapter 4 then, which is page 36. It was the wedding of all the weddings. The prince had fallen in battle. The princess had died of the plague. The legend had said that they would wed and be happy for life. They were counting on the legend. Surely the legend couldn't possibly fail. The prince and princess lay side by side. The priest was about to pronounce them man and wife. The priest looked at the populace looked at the priest. The clock was about to strike midnight. Does anyone know why these two should not be wed? Okay, I'll leave it at that. We go to page 49 for the next one. He walked the length of the town, east to west, north to south. All the people were very busy. Life was keeping them occupied. They barely noticed him as he passed them on the street. Scars would break out on his heart. Scars would break out on his mind. Scars would break out on his sensibility. But not a scar would appear on his hands or on his face. And then lastly, the scars would fester in the night as he tossed and turned on his bed. Then he would rise up in the morning and start the walk of agony again. Okay, from 56 we go to 58. Here we are. There was a cave on the side of a mountain. The entrance was hidden behind a huge rock. He stumbled on it as he searched for a lamb from his field. This is the entrance to the underworld. Here the souls of the dead do dwell. When I meet them, they will tell me what they've learned. And then the last one. He went down in search of wisdom. His sheep were left in the field. The lost lamb was bleeding in the field. Okay, I read that wrong. The sheep. Let me try it again. He went down in search of wisdom. His sheep were left in the fold. The lost lamb was bleeding in the field, so I kind of ruined that one. Okay, page 68 here. A gigantic megalosaurus waddled along the street. Now, this is 1834. Dickens is writing A Christmas Carol, and if you look carefully, you'll find that Dickens refers to a megalosaurus in that novella. I wouldn't have thought so, but there it is when you read the novella. So I made it an image in the mind of John, who's thinking about Dickens and his characters and his novella, A Christmas Carol. Here we go. A gigantic megalosaurus waddled along the street. He had been asleep in a bog for he didn't know how long. He was looking for a herd of megalosauridae. They had wandered off in search of food and left him behind. Okay, from 68 we go to 72. He reached the tallest building. He stopped waddling and stood still. He bent down his head and looked at a window, but all he could see was one gigantic eye. Then we go to the last of the three verses. A crowd had gathered to watch the megalosaurus. He's looking for his mother, said the little boy's mother. He's looking for his father, said the little boy's father. He just wants to see himself, said the little boy. Okay, from there we go to 78 for this one. I will not look over my shoulder. I will not turn. I will not look back. It's a lesson I have learned from fairy tales. Okay, whoops, where am I? Oh, 82, 83, I'm getting mixed up here. Oh, here it is. Sorry about that. So lesson I've learned from fairy tales. My apologies. If I do, I'll turn to stone. I'll turn into a pillar of salt. If I do, I'll have to return to the underworld. And then the last one of that particular item is, here it is, but I have an excellent memory. My eyes were open as I walked. I don't need to turn my head when I feel the urge to look back as I trudge along the trail from the underworld. And now the last one, which starts on page 88. One day, the river began to flow upstream. A lad who was fishing called out to his mother. All of a sudden, he noticed a change on his fishing line. All the people in the village ran down to see. Then we go to this, the middle one of 3. The people came to see what the boy had shouted. Sure enough, the water in the river was flowing upstream. All the water that had fallen as rain on the mountains, excuse me again, it was tugging the other way on the fishing line. And lastly, all the water that had flowed through the river and down to the lake, all the water that left the lake and flowed to the sea. Sure enough, the water in the river was flowing upstream. The people wondered whether there would be water to drink. Okay, now, that's it for the story towers. I won't interpret them, but there they are. They're imagery in the mind of John that is commenting on the present moment experience that he's going through with Dickens and Dickens's characters and the story of A Christmas Carol and so on. But I'll leave that for now. Here's a note on another related topic. I'd like to do a commercial for a book that is not for sale. It's not for sale because it's available for free access on my website, johnpassfield.ca, johnpassfield.ca. Just click on the icon and the book will be yours to read. So here is the book, okay, Deepening Imagery 1, Verses from the Novels by John Passfield. An icon there of a shovel digging for diamonds, okay? This is the manuscript. It's held together with elastics. If I take the elastics off, all the pages will fall out. But on my website, it's a book that you can pop up onto your screen. Okay, let me get back to what I'm reading here. The title is Deepening Imagery 1, Verses from Novels of John Passfield. The cover has an icon, as I mentioned, of a shovel digging for diamond. Here's a passage from the introduction. Here's what it says. I'm 75 years old. Now, I write this note as I write this note. So I'm 75 years to write this note. Now, this is 2023 as I'm reading this, so it's 3 years ago. I'm 78 now. Let me start again. I'm 75 years old as I write this note. In June of 1969, when I was 23 years old, I read a passage in a book by a critic whose name is Una Ellis Fermor, F-E-R-M-O-R, in which she made a statement which I underlined, but which was no more than an interesting comment on the poetic play, a topic in which I was interested at the time. Her comment was, the greatest plays were never realistic from beginning to end. I'll repeat it. The greatest plays were never realistic from beginning to end. In effect, this comment became deepening imagery for me over more than 50 years of my subsequent life and career, in that it worked as an image which helped me to evaluate almost everything I read and thought about in terms of the way in which literature functions as a response to the lives that we humans are living and have always lived. At the time, the quotation only seemed to state the obvious, that the poetic plays in which I found the most complex artistic exploration of the complexities of our lives were filled with poetry, an unrealistic mode of speaking which the writers of prose plays and prose novels had rejected as an old-fashioned and outmoded style of writing. So she seemed to be talking about something that was outmoded, characters speaking in poetry. I left it at that. Much later, I realized that over the years, as I read and studied the poetic play, that powerful but presumably outmoded form of literature, the Alice Fermor quotation was working in my mind, subconsciously, as a means of deepening my understanding of what about the poetic play was valid for all time and what was for sure outmoded and best left in the past. So, something was outmoded in the poetic play over the course of hundreds of years, but something was not outmoded. Out of these two concepts, I'll number them. Number one, the Alice Fermor quotation, and number two, my own search for a form which would allow me to write poetic literature for our own time, came the concept of deepening imagery. Now, here's a passage which I quote in the book Deepening Imagery 1 from an earlier book of mine. So the earlier book of mine is The Making of Cyril Passfield Out West, which I wrote as a response to the rough draft of my newly completed novel, Cyril Passfield Out West. So here is the novel, Cyril Passfield Out West, a novel by John Passfield. That's my dad where my finger is pointing. He's kneeling down. He's blowing on a fire that he and Charlie, his friend, are trying to get going. They're out west in Western Canada in the summer of 1932. It's an actual photograph. I based the novel on his diary of that summer. Okay, let me pick up the thought here. So this is a passage from the journal that I wrote when I wrote that novel. Although I use the terms anthem and dream nightmare in the original note, the explanation serves to explain the concept of deepening imagery. So I won't change the wording, but I'll just pause when I say anthem, and I'll use the much more comprehensive term, deepening imagery. They work the same way. An anthem is an example of deepening imagery. A dream nightmare is an example of deepening imagery. So deepening imagery is a large category. So an anthem, I would now say deepening imagery, is a poem which is embedded in the novel and which acts, or more accurately offers to act, as a deepening and widening agent for the main character and therefore for the novel. It draws for its imagery on topics other than the surface life and circumstances of the main character, though these topics are related to the mental atmosphere in which the main character lives. I would liken these images to our dreams and our nightmares, which are often not related in surface imagery to our daily lives, but which are attempts by the subconscious mind to embody the thematic issues that are of concern to the whole person. The preconscious mind, which is the combination of the subconscious mind and the conscious mind, and which needs to be thought about at deeper and wider levels than the conscious mind is capable of, or perhaps wants to allow itself to contemplate, but which focus with laser-like intensity and problem-solving intent on the topic of concern. So the conscious mind is just getting through the day. The subconscious mind is trying very hard to understand the day, the month, the year, the whole life, the society in which one is living, even the universe in which one is living. How does it do that? By creating imagery, just as your dreams and nightmares do. Imagery which measures, which monitors, which tries to interpret the experience of your daily life. Although we think of dreams and nightmares as of night only, I believe that we think in images in our subconscious minds at every moment of our existence. Anthems, I would say deepening imagery, indicate this phenomenon. Though dreams and nightmares do sometimes draw on imagery from our daily lives, I usually write anthem images, deepening imagery, which do not draw on the daily imagery of the main character, but which do have thematic relationships with imagery. So as I was reading this over, I thought to myself, I'm not a professional football player, so that's not part of my daily experience. But when I think about my daily experience, I might say to myself, I'm like a quarterback. I want to throw the ball to a certain spot. People, other players, the opposing players, are rushing at me. They're not giving me time to do what I want to do in the throwing of that ball. So football for me, because it's not part of my daily life, becomes deepening imagery. It's imagery that helps me to interpret what is true in my daily life. So what are all these problems that I'm trying to solve by throwing the football to the right point? I won't talk about. Nevertheless, personal life, everyday life, you're living it consciously. Subconsciously, you're thinking of imagery, deepening imagery that helps you to interpret your situation, helps you get a clearer picture of how you see yourself and the society, the milieu in which you live. I'm hoping that I'm hoping that a look at the verses that are interlayered throughout the novels and the novellas will help to show a reader how my books are idea structured. I hope that a reading of this book, Deepening Imagery 1, will encourage readers to spend time inside the image dynamics of my novels and novellas. So even though I have to leaf through the pages to put all these little verses together when I read the novels and novellas, because that's how they work in the mind of the main character, I put them all as units, one page at a time in my deepening imagery books. There's more than one deepening imagery book. If you have a look at that, if you're interested, you'll see how they operate as units without being chopped up and spread out and interlayered with other imagery. Okay. Once again, this is my novella, John and Dickens, A Christmas Mystery. So it's found on Amazon. You can have a look there. It's found on my publisher's website, rocksmillspress.com. And at my website, johnpasville.ca, there's 2 free books, a planning notebook and a journal. So have a look if you're interested in the topic of this book, of Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, and of literature in general, and how literature relates to life. I really think that books are about the lives we're living. They're not a holiday or a time out from living. They're a way to try to explore and even understand the lives that we're living. So have a look if you're interested. Lastly, thank you for watching this video.